Chapter 15, 3 Wishes and 1 Dream. Out in the waters where the waves crested around the lighthouse, a shiny blue and gold helmet bobbed up to the surface of the water like a buoy marking a spot. Opistolly loved riding his bicycle through the waves near the surface, but his mom had warned him that he risked being seen or caught in one of the nets, so never ever go to the surface. He was a young one, full of curiosity and wonder, and he had a hard time listening and doing what he was asked. Today was no different. He knew the sounds of danger and what to look out for because he had learned that the hard way last summer, but that fear had drifted out of his mind. He had been venturing up closer and closer to the surface lately because that is where he found most of his treasures. You see, he loved collecting what he called floating loot, little pieces of treasure that floated at or near the surface, especially ones that were shiny or colorful. As he looked up and through the waters, they were a bit murky, and he wondered if a storm was coming. They tended to churn up a lot of the sea bottom and made seeing far off much harder. Still, he ventured on because he had already found part of a plastic cork, half white and half red, tied to some fishing line. In his world, that was a score because he had built a loot tree in his yard and found great joy in hanging his found treasures as dangly bits from the limbs. Oppie's ears were quite sensitive to sounds, and he knew which ones meant danger and which didn't. But when he got excited about looking for things, he tended to ignore those warnings. A splash hit the water over to the right where he was riding, and he could tell something was floating. As he turned to head that way, the echoes of a shrimping boat vibrated through the water, and he knew trouble was coming. Still, he wanted to see what it was, so he pedaled faster. The closer he got, the more excited he grew because he could tell that it was some type of bottle, and he loved bottles. The sunlight shone through it just enough to make it glow a bit, and he could see that it was about the size of 2 of his suckers, which was perfect for his tree. The vibrations became steadier and louder, which told him a boat was approaching. That meant a net could be following, but the water was muddier than he was used to, and he didn't see one. Closer, he almost had it in his grip when a huge wave pushed him forward and off his seat. In a panic, he grabbed his bike with one arm, righted himself with the other, and just before the shadow of the boat was over his head, he grabbed the little blue bottle and tucked it inside his pocket. As he turned to swim downward, he could see the net hit the water like a blanket of broken shapes, and he realized he only had a few seconds to dive before it caught him. Swimming was something that came naturally to him, and he could swim faster than most of his kind at his age, but he would need to leave his bike behind, which broke his heart. Out of absolute fear, he lunged off the bike, pushed his helmeted head straight downward, and whooshed out of the reach of the net. He turned back to see his beloved red bicycle being pulled upward and away from him. Opistolly was grateful to have gotten away, but he was heartbroken over losing his bike, and he knew he would have questions to answer when he got home. He swam toward his street and began planning his story because his mom would be livid with him. She helped him build that bike out of pieces and parts they had collected, so he concocted a tale about how he traded it for this magic blue bottle which held 3 wishes and 1 dream that could come true. Through town, he passed a school of clownfish walking their doggy fins and stopped to speak to Mr. Found-It-All, one of the shopkeepers in town. "Where's your bike, Opie?" "You don't go anywhere without your red wheels," the shopkeeper asked. "Well, that's a long story, one I'll be in big trouble for when I get home," Opie said with a reluctant face. "Cheer up, my boy. These things tend to work themselves out over time, and I'm sure your bike will turn up eventually," he said. Opistolly hoped he was right, but the image of his bike being pulled upward in that net gave him no hope at all. When he turned the corner, the light was shining just right to make his street glow a brilliant turquoise color. The houses were built out of various pieces of discarded wood, pipes, metal parts, and baubles. His kind had a knack for making things beautiful, especially thrown away things or structures that got washed out to sea during storms. Their world had evolved into an underwater haven of the most interesting and unexpected things you could find in Marty Bay, and to him it was beautiful. Seaweed and algae hung gracefully over the doorway and roofs, while glass bubbles floated just above each house, as if they were getting ready to float the whole house away if needed. Even the crabby old Mrs. Sucker Arms had a pretty house, despite being old and shrunk up. He reached his yard, swam through the gate, and headed inside, repeating the story he had made up in his head. "Hey, Mom, I made the most amazing deal ever with an old whale elder, and look what I got," exclaimed Opie with an unconvincing look on his face. He pulled out the little blue bottle he had scored and held it up to the light. "Where'd you find that, Opie?" his mother asked. "It's a nice one." "Well, there was this old whale, you see, and he told me that he would trade me this blue bottle that held 3 wishes and 1 dream for my bike. So I figured I could use one of the wishes to get my bike back and still be ahead too. So I swapped him," Opistolly said. "You did what?" "Opie, we built that bike together. What were you thinking? For a bottle? There aren't wishes in a bottle, Opie. You know that." "Give me that bottle and go wash up for dinner. I'm so disappointed," his mom said. He handed her the small bottle, which she placed in her apron, and dropped his head. "Sorry, Mom, I really am," Opie said quietly and headed to wash up. His dad and younger sister arrived home just before dinner, and as they floated down around the table to eat, Opie's mom made him tell his dad all about how he lost his bike. He went through the story without the excitement this time and couldn't even look his dad in the eyes. His little sister just giggled and chimed in. "Opistolly's done it again." His dad chewed his crab leg, wiped his mouth, and said, "Let's see it. This blue bottle that was worth losing your bike over." His mom pulled it out of her apron pocket and handed it to him. Opistolly looked at it and began saying how beautiful it was in the sunlight and that he just knew it held wishes and dreams. His dad sighed and looked at Opie with a stern face. "Opie, if you saw sunlight through this bottle, that means you were too close to the surface. Where were you when you got this?" his dad asked. Opie dropped his head and very quickly said, "I was swimming up at the top, Dad. I saw it floating, and I just knew I could get it, so I went for it. I'm sorry. I know I wasn't supposed to be up there," he said in a tone that expressed how he knew what he had done wasn't too smart. "So where's your bike, Opie?" his mom asked. It took him a minute, but he got up the courage and said, "The nets caught it. The shrimpers threw out their net, and I had to let it go or I would have gotten caught up in it too," he said. "Oh, Opistolly, we told you not to go up to the surface. It was dangerous. Do you realize? If you would have gotten caught, we could have lost you," his frustrated mom asked. "I do, Mom, and I'm sorry. I shouldn't have gone. I shouldn't have disobeyed you. I'm sorry," he said. His sister grinned and sneered, and his dad's forehead wrinkled more than it had in a long time. "You go ahead to your room, son. I'll be in shortly to talk with you." As Opistolly swam away from the table, his parents looked at each other with frustration. "What are we going to do with him? His dreams and curiosities are bigger than my heart can handle," she asked with a deep love in her voice. "I remember someone like that a long time ago, don't you? Always dreaming and finding her way into a bit of trouble because of her creative ideas," he remarked back. "Oh, I know," she replied, "but we could have lost him today, honey. I couldn't bear that," she said softly. His dad paused, finished up his meal, and picked the bottle up with one of his free arms. As he did, the light caught it at just the right angle, and he realized there was something inside that bottle. Some paper, perhaps. With great care, he untwisted the cork stopper, and with the tip end of his arm, he pulled a note out. As he unraveled it and read the words written, he looked up at his wife with shocked eyes and said, "Ring the echo alarm, Solari. The kids are in trouble."